Up the presses, everybody. How you doing? Welcome to Talking Philly Sports with Matty B here on the edge of phillysports.com, the network, whatever you call it, with your boy Matty B. It is Tuesday, September the 20th, 2022. It's 9 p.m. or almost 9 p.m. and you're on EOP, so that means you're with me here on this Eagles Victory Tuesday. That's right, Eagles Victory Tuesday. The Birds yesterday or last night at Lincoln Financial Field kicked off the home portion of their 2022 season with a booming, resounding ass whooping of the Minnesota Vikings 24-7, which has apparently set everything right in the world here in Philadelphia and has also set everything in the world in Eagle Nation, as all the years and years of doubt and the concerns about our coaching staff and concerns about our quarterback were answered on this Monday evening or last night. And now it's all systems go towards a Super Bowl. That's what they want you to believe there, folks. That's what they want you to think, that after one outstanding victory, and I cannot say that enough, an outstanding victory over the Minnesota Vikings, the Philadelphia Eagles now are 2-0 on the season, 2-0 within the conference, which is huge. And then on Sunday, they will take their show on the road out there to, was it Landover on FedEx Field, and deal with the Washington Commanders and Carson Wentz in our first NFC East battle of the season. And a little bit later here on the program, David Harrison of Locked On the Commanders is going to join me, and we're going to cut that game up. But before we can get to week 3, we got to bounce back to week 2. But before we can bounce back to week 2, we got to lead off the show like we lead it off every week, and that is with this day in Philadelphia sports history. And folks, today I'm going way, way back to 1992. On this day in 1992, the Phillies' Mickey Morandini completed the franchise's very first unassisted triple play in a 3-2 loss against the Pirates. He did it in a fielding a what was it? I'm going to read this to you. So it was Jeff King's liner. Morandini stepped on the bag and then tagged Barry Bonds to complete the triple play. David Bell would complete one in 2008 as well, but that was the first ever unassisted triple play in Philly sports history. So happy Mickey Morandini unassisted triple play day. And that is your day in Philadelphia sports history back in 1992. And I guess that leads us right into the first topic, and that is the week 2 in the National Football League, and more specifically week 2 with the Philadelphia Eagles in their 24-7 victory last night over the Minnesota Vikings. What's up, Dave? How are you doing? Nothing's going on, Dave. Just kind of doing my thing. What's up with you tonight on this fine evening? So heading into this game, if you were listening to Philadelphia Sports Talk Radio last week or listening to this very fine network in EOP, there was a lot of concern. I mean, I guess concern is the word I would use about this coaching staff. Not so much about the players, mind you, but about the coaching staff and their ability to coach. And John Gannon specifically his ability to call defense and to be aggressive and to be opportunistic and to be deceptive, right? So much so that I don't think anybody that I know picked the Eagles to win this game, to include Mr. Kyle Quinn. Mr. Howie Roseman himself picked the Minnesota Vikings to win this game this week. And everybody, to include me, was wrong. And the Eagles answered the bell, answered their critics in a resounding 24-7 domination over the Minnesota Vikings. And in a game of first and best that was really characterized by the play of Jalen Hurts, who had his best game ever as a Philadelphia Eagle quarterback. The game that we've been waiting for 21 starts was put in by Jalen Hurts last night. He went off. He looked sharp. He looked poised. He looked confident. He went 26 for 31 for 333 yards, a touchdown. He was intercepted once, but that wasn't really on him. That was a Ken Gainwell thing. His QBR was 78.3, and his quarterback rating was 108.7. And he was looking all like the quarterback we've been waiting for since he stepped into the starting job back in 2020. The pocket was clean most of the night. The offensive line did a lot better than they did against Detroit. Was that a scheme thing, or was that a Minnesota Vikings scheme thing? Were they not blitzing as much as Detroit? Even though when the pocket was collapsing, Jalen was pushed out, or he would scramble out, but he wasn't looking to run right away. It looked like he was looking for those progressions. He was trying to keep a play alive with his feet until he could find a target with his arm. And that is the Jalen Hurts that we've been looking for and waiting for a very long time. He was also extremely diversive with the football. He spread that ball around big time last night. Not only was A.J. Brown involved in the receiving, but Dallas Goedert, who actually led the way in receiving, had 5 receptions and 82 yards. Then he had Devontae Smith. Welcome to the season, Devontae, sorry, with 7 receptions and 80 yards. Quez Watkins with 2 receptions, 69 yards, and a touchdown on a beautiful, let's just call it what it was, folks, a beautiful bomb from Jalen Hurts. A.J. Brown, 5 receptions for 69 yards. Pascal, 2 receptions for 14 yards. And then the running backs chipped in as well. The ball was being spread around. Jalen Hurts was playing the position like an NFL franchise quarterback last night. That is the bottom line. I don't care what you say. I'm going to take that to the bank any day. But the question now will ride throughout the rest of the season is, can he replicate this? Can he go out in every game and play like this? That remains to be seen. I don't know. We're going to find out here in about 5 days when they play the Commanders. But in the first half, the Eagles rolled in this game. It was all Eagles offense with long sustaining drives, and the Minnesota Viking offense with inability to get anything going because of the John Gannon schemed and led Philadelphia Eagle defense. They were blitzing when they had to. Their coverage was tight. They were on Justin Jefferson like they drafted him. You know, they were locked in. They were flying around the field. They were on the ball. Cousins was harassed all night. He might not have been sacked that much, but he was consistently throwing off that back foot. He was consistently being hurried. He was consistently being rushed into making maybe not so much the kind of plays that he wanted. He was being rushed a bit. It all was just a beautiful thing to behold. And then just when you kind of thought things were turning a little bit for the Eagles, this game to me came down to the final drive of the first half. You guys remember this? The Vikings had gone 3 and out, I believe, or their drive had stalled. They punted the ball back to the Eagles, got the ball within the 5-yard line. Eagles were deep, pinned deep, maybe a minute and change left to go before the half, and Jalen Hurts orchestrated possibly, and even though it was not a touchdown scoring drive, possibly one of the best drives I've ever seen him orchestrate as the Eagle quarterback. He led the team up the field into field goal range for the field goal as time expired into halftime to give the Eagles a 24-7 lead. And that was really all that was needed. I mean, because that's all that was needed, because the two teams did not score any points in the second half. Now, we can find ways to kind of nitpick that, and I will, but 24-7, everybody was feeling good. There was this kind of like easy confidence going on in the building because we knew we had a whole nother half of football left to play. And we were kind of like, well, can we sustain this? We've seen this before. We saw this on Sunday between Baltimore and Miami, but here we are. Do we have it? Everything is clicking on all cylinders. They came back out in the second half. They were just about as dominant on defense. And then they were starting to get turnovers. Folks, the Philadelphia Eagles, 3 interceptions in this game. 3. They now have 4 on the season, which is amazing to me at this point in week 2. They now have 4 interceptions on the season. Darius Slay, the game of his career with the Philadelphia Eagles, 2 interceptions. He was a drive killer. He was all over Justin Jefferson like a cheap suit. It was beautiful on defense. Now, on the offensive side of things, the Eagles moved the football in the second half. They did. They just were unable to capitalize. They did have a blocked field goal. That's never good. But, you know, then they would come a few plays later, take the interception, end the Vikings drive, and pretty much just kind of lull the Vikings to sleep, continuously harassing Kirk Cousins, continuing making his life a living hell, all en route to a 24-7 victory over the Vikings and off to a 2-0 start to start the 2022 season. And do you know what, folks? You know what? Who was happiest the most about this game? It was me. All right. I know that you guys seem to think that I'm some sort of anti-Howie Roseman kind of guy, that I don't like Howie. I don't. All right. And I'll never deny that. But I love the Eagles and I want to see them succeed. I don't think they will under Howie Roseman. So you know how much it pains me every week to have to root kind of like for this team, but not to be like 100% invested like I used to be because I just don't believe anymore. That's really tough for me. And as the Eagles were kind of rolling last night and things were becoming increasingly confident that this team was not going to lose, that they were going to hold on and win this thing emphatically, I began to think about things. I began to wonder, maybe Not that I'm wrong about Howie. I still think he's a criminal. But maybe there's something to what's happening with this football team. Maybe there is something to believe in with this football team. And I began to think about that a little bit. But of course, I'm a Philadelphia sports fan, and we go way over the top on everything. Last week, the sky was falling against the Lions. This week, we're going to the Super Bowl. Earlier this season, we were going to be a 13-win team, but nobody wanted to talk about the Super Bowl. That's the beautiful thing about being a Philadelphia sports fan. We know everything and we know nothing all at the same time. And it's a maddening thing to be saddled with your life. And I'm no different. But I'm not. I am not. I'm not reserving my seats for Super Bowl 57, and I also am not getting my spot on Broad Street camped out or picked out quite yet. I need to see more from this team, but I am liking what I'm seeing. I like the way they handled their business against the Vikings in a game. Let's face it again, the best team they've beaten in almost 2 years of football. This was the best team that they've beaten in almost 2 years of football. So everything that's pointing in the right direction for this team, everything about this win is right. The way it was done, the blowout aspect or the blowout feel to this game, that over the top defense that was just kind of in your face the entire night. That is how it's supposed to be done, and that's the way you leave your fan base, especially when you open up your season at home on Monday Night Football. That is definitely the perfect way to do it, and that's a way that they can ride and into the next couple weeks against two teams that let's face it, they're better than in the Commanders and the Jaguars. So sitting at 2-0, sitting in a position where they are right now, 2-0 within their conference, a division game looming against the Carson Wentz Washington Commanders on Sunday. Again, David Harrison is going to join me here in about 10 minutes, and we're going to talk about this game. It's got to get you excited. It's got to make you excited about where this team is headed. But we've been down this path before. I have been down this path before. I heard a lot of things last night after the game in relation to the 2016 Eagles, how they started the season out 3-0, and they just kind of came out of nowhere in that aspect, and how exciting they were to watch. They were, but do I need to remind you that they finished the season 3-10? So that don't necessarily want. I'm not pinning any kind of I'm not equating this to 2016 or 2017. Of course, this is the first time the team has been 2-0 since that 2016 season. So that's something I guess is looming. But, the feel that I have for this team right now is still unknown. Hassan Reddick, who played himself, whenever Hassan Reddick is on the edge, he seems to confuse offensive lines. He seems to attract a lot of attention. He seems to be an X factor. He may not get to the quarterback every time, but he definitely has to be accounted for on that line. But when they drop him back in the pass coverage, it's like watching a newborn giraffe. I mean, the guy has no idea what he's doing back there on pass coverage. He looks foolish. He gets beat every time. There's no reason for him to ever be in pass coverage. So when they utilize these players correctly, and he was on that line more than anything else, and obviously there's some deception involved too, but when he's utilized the way he's utilized, he's a beast on defense. And everything seemed to click last night. Everything that John Gannon called on the defensive side of things was the right call at that right time. Kirk Cousins was consistently throwing off his back foot all night long, could not get comfortable. Alvin Cook could not get comfortable. Justin Jefferson could not get comfortable. Jalen Reagor could not get comfortable. The entire team was completely thrown off by the scheme and the game plan of John Gannon and Nick Sirianni. And yes, I'm saying that because it's the truth. Now, what happens with this game and what they can build off it from this game remains unknown. We have another game, right? And what do they say? Every game is a season within a week. It's you throw it out the window. Nobody expected the Minnesota Vikings to come out against the Eagles on Monday Night Football and get pretty much slapped around like they did by the Eagles. The Vikings were coming off of a victory against the Green Bay Packers. So this game between the Eagles and Vikings was not, no one expected it between the Eagles. And that doesn't mean anything heading into this week against the Washington Commanders. It's another week, new season within the week, and all that jazz. So let's turn the page, shall we? Let's move on now to week 3. And joining me here on my show for the very first time, let me welcome him in, David Harrison from the Locked On Commanders. David, my friend, welcome. Thank you for taking some time. And
Yeah.
how are you this evening, sir?
I'm doing great, man. I appreciate the invite. Happy to talk about this divisional matchup coming up this weekend, a big one early on in the season.
Absolutely, David. And let's get right to it, shall we? Obviously, the Washington Commanders. There's some ties here. NFC East. You mentioned it. I'm not a big fan of NFC East games or divisional games in general in September. David, where do you come out on that coin of the interdivisional play this early in the season?
Yeah, I mean, it helps the ratings. I'm sure. They're bigger games and they're considered rivalries, even if they're not full blown rivalries like some of the great ones in the league. But yeah, I mean, it's early. It kind of is reminiscent a little bit of if a highly ranked college team goes down in one of their early matchups, there's still plenty of time to make up that space. But I mean, it's a very big opportunity. I mean, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles; it's a chance to get a 2-game lead and an early tiebreaker. Again, it's week 3, so it's hard to really value tiebreakers too much. But having a little bit of change in your pocket is always better than having no change in your pocket, right? So I guess if you're going to look at it from that aspect. But yeah, the later games are certainly going to be much bigger, obviously. But it'll be a good litmus test to kind of see where these teams are early, and then an interesting kind of comparison later on in the season when they meet again.
Yeah, and you mentioned the whole vibe of the early and late. There ain't nothing like NFC East football, say around Christmas time. It just
Yeah.
there's something so right about that, and especially back in the day. Um, David, let's talk a little bit about the Commanders. First and foremost, being from Philadelphia, no, and I think we share a common bond here. We both hate the Cowboys more than life itself, so we can kind of lean on that for each other for this one. But
Yeah.
the Commanders changed their name to the Commanders. It's kind of a joke up here,
Mhm.
commies and all that.
Mhm.
What's the vibe down in D.C., Virginia area about the name? I mean, how you guys like dealing with that? How you guys acclimating to the name?
Yeah, I mean, initially, I mean, when you were going through the whole process, the team did this big campaign where like the fans were involved and they had these fan ambassadors and I don't know really how the Eagles fan base necessarily is, but I know I covered the Buccaneers as well. The Buccaneers have some fans that are kind of more popular or famous within the fan base than others, and the Commanders are the same way. I'm sure that the Eagles have their fans that are kind of more known and most more recognized widely. And the Commanders kind of leaned on those fans and like they brought them to the stadium. They're like, hey, here are the final 8 options or something like that. And what do you think of them? And stuff like that. But very early on in the process, everybody pretty much was hook, line, and sinker that it was going to be Commanders. Like there were some other favorites like Red Wolves and stuff like that. But ultimately, everybody pretty much settled in that it was going to be Commanders. I would say the general feel, probably about 75% of the fan base didn't really like it. I don't know that anybody in the media really liked it. But honestly, as you move forward to it, I'll tell you honestly, when the logo came out as well in the uniforms, like my first reaction was just those are not good looking uniforms. Um, but I will also admit that when we showed up for rookie mini camp, it's the first time we get to see the new helmet. I mean, they're practice jerseys, so we don't get to see the full uniform, but that's the first time we get to see the new helmet in person. And we walked into the dome. A few of the rookies had their helmets kind of lined up on the sideline, and we were, just standing there. I looked at them and said, you know what? Actually, those look pretty clean in person. I actually don't mind them so much. And then the uniforms, they also look better in person. And I think just the more you get used to saying the name and hearing the name and all that stuff, I think people have just kind of grown accustomed to it. And honestly, I think it's almost a little bit better that they have a new quarterback because this quarterback hasn't led this team in the old uniform or the old name or anything like that. So it's kind of just a feeling of a fresh start, so to speak. And I think now probably 70 to 75% of the fan base either likes it or is just tolerable. They'll tolerate it. It is what it is at this point in time. While, there's probably about a 20%, 20 to 30% portion of it that is just kind of diehard, like holding on to, not accepting the name. Then in the media, I don't think anybody cares anymore, to be quite honest with you.
Well, I do it every now and again. I still slip. It's
Yeah.
going to be hard to get rid of the Redskins.
Right.
It's just all my life, and we're doing better. We're doing better with it up here. It's not so much an automatic thing anymore. Now it's just kind of a once in a while thing. So I agree. I personally was looking for Warriors. I thought the Warriors would have been good. But
Yeah, that would have made sense too. Yep.
That all right. Let's move on to this. So this season's pretty unique for the Eagles. We are seemingly on some sort of reunion tour this year. Last night we boogied down with Jalen Rager. This
Yep.
week now we got Carson Wentz coming, or we're going to meet up with Carson Wentz again. I gotta ask, what was the initial reaction when the Commanders did acquire Carson Wentz, and since he's been there, And I know he's not played awful. He's done
Mhm.
okay in the first 2 weeks. What is necessarily the reaction of him now that he's kind of acclimated into the job?
Yeah, I mean, the immediate reaction was just more. It was more so of this isn't the guy that everybody kind of wanted, or it wasn't the splash that everybody really was hoping to look for. Obviously, Russell Wilson was the most popular name going into the offseason. And then at the Pro Bowl, he and Jonathan Allen, took some photos together, and Russell Wilson's got ties to the area, so there's just all this kind of like it's in the stars type of motive going on or feel going on that Russell Wilson was going to end up, part of the Washington franchise, and then it kind of started coming out though that he didn't really want to move that far east. He wanted to stay as far west as he could. And some people were like, well, that's just smoke screen. You know how the offseason is.
Yeah.
It's all kind of crazy. But at the end of the day, I mean, it really proved, I think, to be correct. Him choosing Denver over Washington and some other teams that were obviously in the running. I think it proves that he really did. He kind of wanted to stay over there. And I think there might be some credence to him wanting to play for an offensive-minded head coach. He's been playing for Pete Carroll for so long, and the stories are that they kind of clashed on like who was in charge and what the focus really was and where the emphasis on the roster building was. And Washington's a defensive-minded team as well, and even with Carson, they're the ideal Washington Commanders game script for the entire 4 quarters is going to go early lead, bleed the clock, win with defense, and suffocate the opposing offense. That's still what this team wants to do. It's just not working out in the first 2 weeks of the season. Even when they get the win, it just didn't go that way. But Carson, so he was kind of behind the 8 ball already because he wasn't, the big name, the Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson. And obviously, Matt Ryan at the time wasn't available. Baker Mayfield wasn't available. So all those things happen. And then the baggage comes, and obviously we have to talk about that and just kind of acknowledge that there is some baggage. But I think perhaps one of the best things that ever happened to Carson Wentz is to come to a team where really nobody knows him. It's you talk about clean slate, like it's literally a clean slate. Going from Philly to Indy really isn't a clean slate because people know him, right? Frank Wright knows him, and you think, well, there's support there. Well, there's support there, but there's also a give and take. And I promise you that Frank Wright was honest with Jim Irsay with their staff when they brought in Carson. It wasn't just all roses and butterflies. There was some acknowledgement of some of the downside that came along with that. But here in Washington, all that stuff can truly be history, and he just gets a fresh start. And you talk about reunion tours. Basically, Carson's on a revenge tour. The first one is Jacksonville that ended Indianapolis this season a year ago, and then now obviously you have Philly. Indianapolis is coming up, going back to Philly for the first time. That's going to be a big one from a storyline perspective. But yeah, I mean, right now Carson is not the problem. For anybody out there who thinks Carson might be the problem, Carson is not the problem, even with the turnovers. The problem for this Washington team so far has been the defense, which is copy paste from last year.
Yeah, and so we'll get into the X's and O's. I want to follow up one more Carson Wentz question. Coming out of Philadelphia, obviously the attitude or the ego was kind of the storyline here, that he kind of just was like, it's my way or the highway type situation.
Right.
Has there been any indication of that so far? What kind of a teammate do you think Carson Wentz is right now with the Washington Commanders?
Yeah, from everything we've seen, he's been great. Obviously when he first came in, I think he knew that all the eyes were on him. And honestly, our eyes were on him from a quarterback standpoint, throwing the ball and getting in sync with his receivers and all that stuff, just as much as it was from a teammate standpoint. So when he's on, when he's not in the drill and he's off to the side with the players, is he interacting with guys? And early on, you saw Chase Young and Carson kind of talking, when the second or third team offense was on the field, Carson was over there talking with Scott Turner, joking around with Logan Thomas. And then you see him, in the locker room, and he's joking around with guys. He and Taylor Heineke and Sam Howell are over there in the quarterback corner, kind of, joking, laughing, having a good time. I mean, he looks comfortable. The guys look comfortable around him, and something that in that Jacksonville game when Travon Walker had that crazy interception there, that really kind of helped Jacksonville get their momentum rolling. I pulled out the binoculars and I just trained them on Carson on the sideline. Just wanted to see kind of how the demeanor was. And I'll tell you, like, they look just like they look every other day that I've gotten to see them. There was nobody shook. Nobody was, yelling, throwing things, panicking, anything like that. And then you hear after the game, Ron went up to him and said, "Hey, look, shake it off. You're going to have to go out there and win this game for us." He said, "I will. No, don't worry about it." They go out there and they win the game. So, again, we're still very young into this whole thing. Really, you're only talking about, you're in the 3rd month really of this whole thing being put together. But as of right now, I think I'm pleasantly surprised. Hearing all the stories, I don't know what I really kind of expected, but I'm almost pleasantly surprised in just how much it really seems like he's just kind of blended in with the guys.
Now, the standpoint here for Philadelphia, one last about Carson, we'll get into the game, I promise. But Carson's such a juicy topic for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
there's the perception that Carson Wentz is somewhat on his last leg of a
Mhm.
potential starting quarterback. This could be it. This It doesn't work here. This third strike you're out type situation. Is that are you guys picking up on that down there in DC area? Has that been kind of like is that any kind of vibe that going on when dealing with Carson? Is there questions about that? Has he intimated about any of that? I mean, what's that kind of like that down there in terms of that?
Yeah, I think the real question is, are we talking about is this Carson Wentz's last team to have an opportunity, or is his last chance to really prove he can lead a franchise? And then I think there's like phases in quarterback life, in a quarterback life cycle in the National Football League, and usually it starts with most of these guys in the beginning where they're expected to be the savior of a franchise, right? And Carson Wentz goes second overall, Jared Goff goes first. They're both expected to resurrect these franchises and bring them back to glory. For some guys, it works, right? You look at, I want to say Tom Brady, but he wasn't expected to be that guy when they brought him in. But you look at some of these guys and they're able to kind of resurrect their franchises around them, and it's great. But then for those who don't, you enter that second phase of an NFL quarterback life cycle, which is the rehabilitation phase, which is everybody's still wrapped up around this potential. And maybe they just need to change scenery. Maybe it's just a coaching change, a scheme change. Maybe they just, maybe it's just the negativity in the area is just too much and they just need to get out of that situation. And they could still, and people cross their fingers that they could still be a franchise leader. This could still be a quarterback that elevates people around them. For some guys that works, for some guys it doesn't. If it doesn't, they go to the third cycle. The third cycle is now you're the game manager that everybody's going to put everything around you. Now you're not expected to lead. You're expected to lead because you're quarterback, but not from a upfront standpoint, right? And then you're not expected to be the guy that rises all the ships. You're supposed to be one of the boats in the lake that gets risen with, usually a dominant defense. That's usually what we see in that third phase of a quarterback life cycle. And then if that doesn't work, usually now you're in Josh McCown territory or you're just out of the NFL. So for Carson Wentz, honestly, I think the days of people thinking he's going to be the guy that elevates a franchise by himself, I think that part's over. I think we're now officially into that third phase, which is what Washington really is doing, where they're trying to put a defense on the field they think can hold teams to below 27 points, which I think is really the mean that you have to keep teams under to try to win. And they're trying to put the weapons, you see the weapons that they have on the field right now and the running game. Because remember, this team is without Brian Robinson Jr., who nobody has seen in a regular season game. But I promise you, from what we've seen and what we saw in the preseason, he is a major part of what this offense is supposed to be. And without him on the field, I would say there's probably about a 35% decline in what this offense is really capable of without him on the field.
Yeah, and you mentioned gone are the days of people thinking that Carson can elevate a franchise. I think the big thing with Carson Wentz is he needs to accept the fact that he can't necessarily resurrect the franchise. And that's probably, I think, what has been always what we think here in Philadelphia went wrong. Because 2017, injury or no injury, he was the league MVP. And I mean,
Agreed.
obviously Brady, but he had just an amazing season. And of course, then everything that happened after that was movie worthy with the Nick Foles thing and all that. So yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, but it's always to me come down to what Carson Wentz thinks he is. And that's how this thing is going to play itself out. Is he accepts the fact that he's entering potentially to a different phase of quarterback play, then yes, he might be successful in that. But if he doesn't, it's probably going to be on to the next team here in a couple of years. So I agree with you, though. I do. I agree with everything you're saying about Carson. All right, David, let's go into the season so far. The Commanders entered this game 1-1. Came out, with the Doug Peterson smack in the face. Carson Wentz versus Doug Peterson, Week 1, Jacksonville Jaguars. Then you guys ran up against the team that gave the Eagles fits in week 1, the Detroit Lions. David, talk to me a little bit about what happened at Ford Field on Sunday. Where did it all go awry for the Commanders against the Lions?
I think on defense, it really boils down to communication and just understanding your role. And you talk about with Carson Wentz of understanding what your job, your responsibility is on the team. And you look at the defense, that's a theme that came up all throughout 2021 and 2 games into it. Now we're hearing it again in 2022. And to be completely honest, the same situation happened in the first game against Jacksonville. Jacksonville just wasn't able to take advantage of it nearly as much as the Detroit Lions were. So they came away with the win. And, from a coaching standpoint, the media is happy. The fans are happy. Everybody's like, oh, Carson Wentz had his first, 4-touchdown game since that 2017 season with the Philadelphia Eagles. So let's just, let's everybody hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And as a coach, Ron Rivera's not going to come out and try to squash that. But he did actually admit that, there were some things that need to get cleaned up, and specifically with with last year's first round draft pick, Jamin Davis. But Then in Detroit, you see those issues kind of grow. And I think part of that is because Jonathan Allen came in with a groin injury, was supposed to be on a pitch count, but you lose, or the Washington lost, Daniel Wise, who's kind of his initial backup. And then Casey Toohill also went down, which made Jonathan Allen have to play more. And he is actually hurt. He's not, fully injured, but he is a hurt player. So he's a little bit degraded. And then Jamin Davis, just as we expected, because of what the Jacksonville Jaguars were able to do with Travis Etienne going up against him, especially in the passing game, they targeted him with guys like DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson, which is what I fully expect the Philadelphia Eagles to also do, is target Jamin Davis with running backs and tight ends in the passing game, because teams are going to keep doing this until Jamin proves that he can stop it. And while he can't, guys like Cole Holcomb, Cam Curl, if he can go, which, all signs are pointing early that he will be able to go. Derek Forrest, who will drop down to the box as Buffalo nickel. They're all going to have to step up, and they're all going to have to try to help this guy. The problem with doing that is you don't typically see someone in double coverage with a linebacker partner, right? So if you're taking someone away from another assignment to help Jamin Davis, where are you taking them from? Is it against Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins? Is it against one of these other guys? Like, there's a lot of weapons that Philadelphia has. Or are you taking someone out of a space that now Jalen Hurts is going to run right into that open space and kill you that way? So, assignment football is huge here, and Jamin Davis is kind of the main, I don't want to say culprit because he's not the only one, but he's kind of the main focus that everybody's really looking at, mainly because of that first round draft pick status. But you also look at Derek Forrest, who was the backup that got the starts while Cam Curl was out, had a 92 PFF grade, I think, against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then drops all the way down like a 34 against the Detroit Lions. A lot of miscommunication, not being in the right place, not making the right play. And then William Jackson on an early, two early plays, the early pass play from Jared Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He and Benjamin St. Juste kind of get crossed up on crossing patterns, and they're in man coverage. Benjamin St. Juste follows his guy. William Jackson also follows Benjamin St. Juste's guy, and number 14 gets let loose to run free. So that's a huge miscommunication, leads to a very, very explosive play. And then later on in the early part of the game, William Jackson's actually in very good position to make a play in the end zone, potentially get an interception and keep points off the board, and he slips. I mean, it happens. You don't want to kill a guy over that, but he slips, and instead of getting an interception, Amon-Ra St. Brown gets his first touchdown of the game. And just things like that just plagued the defense all throughout. And then early on, the Washington Commanders offense, they can't get the running game going as well as they can against Jacksonville because Detroit's got a better run defense. I think Philadelphia's got a better run defense as well. They're going to have some problems getting the run game going because of missing Brian Robinson Jr. He's just a different type of runner than Antonio Gibson is. And, Antonio can try as hard as he wants, but he's not going to replicate what Brian Robinson brings to the field.
Right. If you're just joining us, speaking to David Harrison from Locked On Commanders, and David, again, thanks for your time.
Yeah.
As we move into this game, obviously the loss of Chase Young, you mentioned Cam Curl. Now, Cam Curl should be reevaluated. He should be cleared to play for Week 3. Is that all indications that are pointing that Curl will be back this week?
Yeah, John Keim out of ESPN, the Commanders beat writer for ESPN, is reporting that he actually has been cleared. So again, I mean, we have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday injury reports. We'll see him tomorrow morning at practice. Apparently, he's got a splint that they have developed for him to be able to play, and protect that thumb that he had surgery on. So we'll see if he's out there Wednesday. Obviously, that report is coming from somewhere. So we expect him to be out there for practice tomorrow, and then eventually play against the Eagles on Sunday.
Now, last night, the Eagles kind of broke out on national TV, put it to the Minnesota Vikings. Jalen Hurts, arguably, I mean, I'm going to tell you, it's the best game I've ever seen him play in the Eagle uniform. Yeah. Hell, it might be the best game I've ever seen him play in a uniform. I just was doing everything that we wanted him to do. Was not initially, wasn't one read and go. It was, I'm going to break the pocket, but I'm going to extend the play. I'm going to keep looking. I'm going to keep moving and go through my progressions. It was really a good thing to see. When you look at this Eagle offense, assuming that it's going to be the same type of attack that they had against the Vikings, what, from a Washington Commander defensive standpoint, concerns you the most matchup-wise with the Eagles offense?
Containment. And it's not just, you start with traditional containment, right? You talk about the pocket and not, collapsing inside while Jalen Hurts runs around your defensive ends and all that stuff. But containment across the field, I mean, really, what I like about the Philadelphia Eagles offense is they have a 4-dimensional offense. This is kind of something I talk about sometimes. Everybody talks 3-dimensional, right? The short game, intermediate, deep, and obviously the running game is an extension of all that stuff, right? But you also have the fourth dimension for the Philadelphia Eagles, which is what happens behind the line of scrimmage, because you could have Jalen Hurts dead to rights, and that play is nowhere near over. In fact, as the Minnesota Vikings learned very quickly, it could also, not only is it not dead, but it could actually be a touchdown. But I think when you look at the Minnesota Vikings and Philadelphia Eagles game, I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to walk away from that game, and obviously they've already done some film study, but they're going to kick themselves because they had opportunities. There were chances there. The Irv Smith drop pass that potentially is a touchdown, depending on how clean that reception ends up being if he doesn't drop it. There were some turnover opportunities for the Minnesota Vikings to capitalize, and of course their own turnovers in scoring range, killing themselves. And look, I don't want to take anything away from Eagles players, especially big play Slay made some very good plays, but there's also just some very bad plays. That first interception for Darius, I think, is more of a bad play for the Vikings than it is a great play for him. He was in great position anyway, you know what I mean? So even if Kirk and Justin are on the same page, I don't know that play is actually completed anyway. But the way that it went down it's a very terrible communication situation for the Minnesota Vikings. So I think the Minnesota Vikings are a better team than they showed themselves to be against the Eagles. But that's really what this boils down to. I mean, this league is designed for everybody. The parity situation in this league is unmatched across professional sports, and that's what makes the NFL so exciting and why they're still king, is that the New York Giants can be 2-0, you know what I mean, and surprise everybody, and the Cincinnati Bengals can be 0-2, right? Like, these are things that can happen in the NFL, and they do happen every single year. And really, and the same thing goes for the Detroit Lions and the Washington Commanders. You can go back to that game, and I can pick out 6 plays for you that if the Washington Commanders execute better or take advantage of an opportunity that they had that they didn't execute on or take advantage of, they win that game. Minnesota Vikings, I mean, again, the Eagles did a lot of great things. So, I mean, I don't know that I would say that I could point to 6 situations and say, look, the Vikings win this game if all these things go, if they do these things better. But I will say that it's a 1-score win for the Eagles, if not a win for the Minnesota Vikings. I think what it boils down to, and you go back to Detroit as well. I watched that game, the Eagles-Lions game, and that game was the same as well. I think both teams left some plays and some points on the field in week 1. But at the end of the day, the Eagles took more advantage of the opportunities than the Lions did. And this week against the Minnesota Vikings, the Eagles, honestly, outside of the Gainwell interception, the interception off of Gainwell, right? I think that honestly, to me, and there was actually one more play where I think Slay cut under a route and he could have had an interception. It would have been a hard interception, but he
in the end zone. Yeah.
Those 2 plays, like, that's it. Those are the only 2 opportunities that I saw from the Eagles that they did not capitalize on. They capitalized on every other opportunity, offensive and
blocked field goal was they didn't capitalize.
Block field. Yeah. Pat Peterson getting in there. But you know what? But I'm glad you point that. Honestly, probably the one opportunity the Minnesota Vikings really took advantage of was Pat Peterson getting that great jump and getting that block. So when you have that type of discrepancy, I didn't chart it, but you're probably looking at probably about 12 missed opportunities for the Vikings and 2 missed opportunities, maybe 3 for the Eagles. I mean, you're never going to win if you're on the wrong side of that ratio.
Yeah, and you said it yourself. And here in Philadelphia, we've upgraded personnel, and that's been a big story here. How he finally listened to the fans. He brought in the players that he addressed linebacker. He addressed certain positions along the defensive front. Take that excuse away from John Gannon that he didn't have personnel. Then he comes out in week 1, and we play a very soft zone, and we just get pushed around the field by the Lions. And then all of a sudden in week 2, it's like John Gannon was reborn, and I don't know if he was feeling pressure or what, but the personnel doesn't seem to be the issue here. It seems whether or not our coaching staff decides that they want to be the smartest people in the room and try to outthink everybody or just play old-fashioned football. And when they do not do that and they turn the Hassan Reddicks of the world loose, good things do happen for the Eagles on defense. And they were getting a significant amount more push on the offensive line of the Minnesota Vikings than they did against the Lions. Cousins was consistently throwing off his back foot. I charted 6 passes off his back foot, and that one, the Slay interception in the end of the game, no, the Maddox interception was a play that was from Kirk Cousins' back foot. So they did what they had to do in order to kind of create some opportunity. Now, for the Commanders on offense, what defensive personnel or package or scheme do you think the Commanders can capitalize and exploit the most against the Eagles?
Yeah, I think you have your choice of poisons to pick from, right? And the Vikings chose early, to try and get after Jalen Hurts, and it didn't work. So I think they shifted to, okay, let's make Jalen throw and hope that we can capitalize on, again, some opportunities. And there were some chances. There were some plays that, the Vikings could have come away with potentially an interception or at least getting off the field and preventing points from getting on the board, and they didn't capitalize on those. I think if you're Minnesota, you're thinking for Washington, you're Jack Del Rio, you got to be real about your team. Where's your strength? Where's your weakness as you know it right now, right? Let's not talk about potential. Let's not talk about possibilities. let's talk about what we know. And what we know is this team is not getting very good pass rush organically with their front. So in order to get that pass rush going, you're really needing to blitz from the second level, maybe even from a defensive back level, right? So what happens when you do that? Well, against a guy like Jalen Hurts, if your edges aren't keeping contained during those blitz, well, he's just going to run around your blitz and then you're done. He's either going to find an open receiver somewhere because you've got a thin secondary, or he's just going to take off and get as many yards as he can on his own. So do you trust your defensive ends to maintain that contain while the blitz works inside of the pocket? I don't know that you can do that because, again, part of the big problem that we have with this defense right now that we've seen is that guys aren't playing their role. And I saw the Minnesota Vikings lose contain. The defensive end is on an outside rush. He dips inside. Jalen Hurts runs around him. And I don't know how many times you have to get burned doing that before you realize it's not a good idea. You shouldn't be doing that kind of a thing. But the Minnesota Vikings didn't really seem to kind of get that picture. And unfortunately, the Washington Commanders defense, sometimes they have a hard time getting that lesson through their heads as well. So if you come out with that type of an attack, you're probably going to get burned very often with that type of play. At the same time, if you lay back, everybody talks about the weakness in Jalen Hurts' game right now being his arm and his ability as a passing quarterback. And I think that's probably still true. But I think what he's also shown these first 2 weeks is he's a lot better as a thrower than he was the last time we saw him before this season started. And that's very real. And, I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan. I actually was one of the guys I was lobbying for the Buccaneers to draft him when he came out because I wanted him to do the Aaron Rodgers thing with him and give him a few years to learn behind someone really great and then come out when that time came. But the Eagles are obviously benefiting from that decision-making process. So I think for Washington, if I'm Jack Del Rio, honestly, I don't trust that our pass rush is going to get there organically, and blitzing, I don't trust that our defensive ends are going to keep the pocket and keep contained on Jalen Hurts. So I'm going to do essentially what the Minnesota Vikings did, which sounds crazy, but you're going to play coverage and you're going to stay in front. You're going to stay disciplined. You're going to kind of keep Jalen Hurts from really taking over the game with his legs. And you have to take advantage of the opportunities when they do arrive. He's going to get yards and he's probably going to get touchdowns, but there are going to be 1 or 2 or maybe 3 passes you can capitalize on. If you do, you give the ball back to your offense, potentially in really good field position, or you at least keep points off the board. That's where the win can come in. But again, it's kind of a double-edged sword here because we've seen this Washington Commander, just talked about with the Detroit Lions. They don't capitalize on those opportunities when they come up.
So talking with David Harrison of Locked On the Commanders. Dave, I got a question from somebody out in the audience. Our boy Cowboy Dave, he's actually on the EOP network here. Don't ask me why a Cowboy fan is working for Philadelphia Sports Network. We're still trying to figure that out too. But Cowboy Dave asked, can you see Terry McLaurin having a big game on Sunday against the Eagles defense? I would imagine specifically Darius Slay.
Yeah, I mean, a big game from like a receptions and yards and touchdowns perspective, probably not. I mean, I have a feeling that, I think you're probably maxing out at about 4 catches. You're probably looking at more like 70 to 75 yards and a touchdown, maybe 2 if things go well. But I don't think the Philadelphia Eagles are really going to look to let Terry kind of do some of the things that Terry does really well. And when you look at how effective teams have been trying to get pressure on Carson Wentz, I think it's something that the Detroit Lions showed as well. Terry's role in Terry's game is it's not a super long developing route type of system, right? But he's not the quickest guy on the team, and a lot of their quick plays go to Jahan Dotson, they go to Curtis Samuel, they go to J.D. McKissick, and sometimes even Logan Thomas as the tight end. So I don't know that Washington is looking to force the issue of getting Terry the ball because they're pretty happy with the offense as it's running. Currently, obviously, there's some deficiencies like we talked about with the running game and all that. But overall, from the receiver standpoint, actually, I wrote this up last week against Detroit. 5 Commanders had 5 or more targets, and those 5 were McLaurin, Samuel, Dotson, McKissick, and Thomas. And if you take the targets from those 5 receivers, Carson Wentz completed 74% of his passes, had a touchdown and an interception, over 300 yards, and about a 110 QBR. I'm not QBR smart enough to get an exact QBR, but it's around a 110 QBR. That's great. And it's much better than the QBR in the stat line that he actually finished with. So it kind of shows you those main 5 guys, they're doing really well with those main 5 guys. It's the other opportunities, the Cam Sims opportunities, the John Bates, Cole Turner, if he can play this weekend. Those are the opportunities that they're kind of missing on right now. So while you're trying to fix the rest of that, I think the first 5 guys, I think you want to just kind of keep that intact and keep doing what you're doing because it's working and you're benefiting from it. So while you're trying to fix the rest and get the rest of the group up to speed, I don't think you tweak too much of that. So unfortunately for guys that have McLaurin on their fantasy rosters, probably he's very touchdown dependent as far as that's concerned. He'll get his targets, 5, 6, 7 targets, but I think you're probably looking at 3 or 4 catches and a touchdown if the right play comes up.
Now, Dave, you mentioned you're a big Jalen Hurts guy, so let's play
Yeah.
GM here. I'm the GM. I'm not Howie Roseman. I'm the new GM if we fire Howie Roseman of the Philadelphia Eagles, and you're the GM of the Commanders.
Yeah.
I will give you a Hurts right now for a 24 first and a 25 second. You making that deal?
I would make that. Well, I mean, so the problem is Carson Wentz being on the roster.
Okay.
I can't bring Jalen Hurts on the roster with Carson Wentz being on the roster. So
let's bring Nick Foles as a third string guy. Yeah.
So Carson is still in town. No, I'm not making that deal because
Carson's gone. Carson didn't work out. And in this trade, I'm talking to you in January.
There you go.
The trade I offer.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think Jalen has shown the promise, the poise, and the potential. You know what I mean? And you see the growth, right? So if my quarterback coach and my offense coordinator can tap into that growth and continue to build on top of it, then I think you got a quarterback that can certainly lead your franchise for a long time.
It's interesting to hear because we're getting to that point in Jalen Hurts. One of the big running jokes that I have for Jalen Hurts, I'm not a big Jalen Hurts guy. I think he's a very good, competent quarterback, but I don't know franchise right now. And one of the big jokes around town is, or for me, he's entering the third year of his rookie year. So the longest rookie year in the history of the National Football League is with Jalen Hurts. Because I hear the same thing every week. We just got to be patient. We got to.
Can I say this though? So I love the franchise quarterback conversation, right? Because I think the franchise quarterback conversation, a lot of time we try to put quarterbacks in this box and you're either a franchise quarterback or you're not. But I always kind of counter that a little bit with Joe Flacco was a franchise quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens for a relatively short period of time, right? But he was exactly what that franchise needed for that stretch. And they got a Lombardi out of it. They got a championship out of it. So I think the term franchise quarterback, really you're looking at what do we need from our quarterback? What do we expect out of our quarterback? And can this quarterback develop it or produce that? And I think as much of that goes into the quarterback as does the decision-making around him. So that's just kind of my little opinion about the term franchise quarterback.
But you would agree as well, though, that everybody should be looking to get one thing, and that's Lombardi trophies. And that
absolutely,
quarterbacks. If you look at Carson Wentz, do you see him as that type of quarterback? Because right now, I look at Jalen Hurts, and I don't see that. Do you see that?
And no, I agree with you. I don't like Jalen Hurts right now is not an Aaron Rodgers. He's not a Tom Brady. He's not one of those guys. But again, Aaron Rodgers only has one Super Bowl himself. In fact, every time I get to talk to our Locked On Packers host Peter Bukowski, I love to bring up that the Green Bay Packers have over 30 consecutive seasons of Hall of Fame caliber quarterback play and 2 Super Bowls to show for it.
That's very true. All right, Dave. 3 keys to victory for the Washington Commanders on Sunday. If they pull it out, what are those 3 keys for victory?
Yeah. So on offense, do what you do best. Play fast, right? If it's got to be short, it's got to be short. If it's a screen, it's a screen. If it's an end around, a jet sweep, whatever you want to call it, do what you do best and do it well, right? Focus on what you do well. Don't try to be superheroes out there. On the defense side of the ball, man, is communicate. We've seen this defense communicate in camp. We've seen them communicate in the preseason. When they do talk, they're very, very good. But when I watched on the field in Detroit, was not a defense that was talking to each other. This was a bunch of defenders out there trying to make plays for their team. I will give them credit for that, but they weren't working as a unit. They were working as a bunch of individuals trying to be the guy to spark the unit, get back to that unified front. And from the coaching staff, their key is hold these guys accountable, right? We're starting to see this coaching staff kind of put the players out front a little bit more, and they're starting to put a little bit of names to some mistakes, and they're starting to say, we had a guy on this specific play who is supposed to drop down in the box and didn't, and everybody's got access to all 22 these days, and it takes one click of the button to go through and say, oh, that was Derek Forrest who's supposed to come down and didn't, and he missed his assignment. So if you're going to put the players out there in the media, then that means the next step needs to be pulling them off the field if they continue to make these mistakes, because it's one thing to identify the problem. It's another thing to let the problem continue to be a problem. So for me, those are 3 keys for this team: offensive, defensive, and actually special teams. I'm going to the coaching staff.
All right, David, give me your prediction and score. Are you prepared to give me a prediction and score for this game?
Yeah. So my score may fluctuate. So we usually make our predictions on our Friday episode. But I knew that question was coming. Look, right now, the way that these teams are playing, again, I think these teams are closer than a lot of people realize roster wise. But right now, the Philadelphia Eagles are a team that, like we talked about, they're taking advantage of all their opportunities, offensive and defensive and special teams. They're taking advantage of the opportunities they're getting, while the Washington Commanders are leaving a lot of those opportunities on the field. And it's hard for me to look at that trend in the first 2 weeks here and not say that I think the Philadelphia Eagles come out of this thing with the victory. And I do. Right now, I think you're probably looking at a score that's somewhere in the range of 27-17, just based off of kind of what I've seen. But I do feel like that's going to be maybe a 24 to 21-17 score, and then late in the fourth quarter turns in to that 27-17. So maybe a closer game than the score lets on versus anything else. But I do, as of right now, and again, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday practice and seeing these guys in their atmosphere and where they are mentally could possibly change that. But having not seen any of the game prep so far this week, I got to go Philly.
So when you say 27-17, is this a game that's pretty much dominated or controlled by the Eagles and the Commanders kind of pulling it out, or is this kind of a neck and neck and then the Eagles pull out in front late? Is that kind of
Yeah, I think it's a little bit closer. You know what I mean? It might get like 14-0, and then Washington makes 14-10, something like that. And I think it kind of goes back and forth a little bit like that. But I think ultimately Philly pulls out in the fourth quarter, and probably a desperation throw interception, by Carson Wentz or something, and the Eagles fans get to see Carson get intercepted by an Eagle, and that the entire city gets to rejoice in that. But I think that's probably right now. That's how I kind of see this going. And again, the status of Cam Curl, the health of Jonathan Allen, and if he's getting any better, and then I'm looking forward to getting into the locker room and just kind of seeing how these guys are vibing after what happened in Detroit.
Now, David, you mentioned the Eagles fans being able to see that. I know for a fact at least 1,000 of them are on their way down to FedEx Field for this.
Yeah, I expect it.
For this game. This is going to be. I mean, we travel well, and we definitely travel to our NFC East rivals very well.
Yeah.
Give me an MVP of this game for anybody, whoever you think. It could be a player, a coach. It could be the guy that fixed the railings at FedEx Field. You give me an MVP for this game, David.
I love that. If the Eagles win, I mean, obviously Jalen's going to play a huge part, right? So it's unfair to pick Jalen Hurts. But if the Eagles going to win here, I think Miles Sanders is going to have a big opportunity. Maybe Gainwell. I mean, I don't know what the coaching staff confidence is in him right now, but what we've seen early on in the first two games, even the one that the Commanders won, is that running backs can take advantage of this team. And again, we talked about Jamin Davis earlier, and this is another matchup that the Eagles could potentially exploit is if they get Jamin Davis in coverage, especially isolated on their running back, then potentially make big plays there. For the Washington Commanders, I think if things go right for them, then honestly, I'm looking at Cole Holcomb. Cole Holcomb, a team captain, Mike linebacker. He's calling the plays. He's calling the adjustments. We talk about communication. He didn't have a great game in Detroit either, and usually he's kind of the best part of the linebacker group going back and through his history. So he needs to step up again. He needs to be that leader that we know that he can be and that he is. Get his guys in the right place and make sure that they're communicating so that we don't have two guys covering a number 4 receiver while your number 1 guy runs free down the field.
All right, David Harrison from Locked On the Commanders. David, where can we find you out there? Tell the people how they can hear read some of your great stuff, man.
Yeah, so I appreciate the time. First of all, I appreciate the invite. Great talking, great being on. I write for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Commander Country, and Bucks game day. Credentialed with both teams, cover both teams. It's very hectic. It's very crazy. But I do that, and then also Locked On Commanders and Locked On Bucks as well for both of them. I was in New Orleans this last weekend. I'll be back here in FedEx this weekend for this game against the Eagles, and then I'll be back in Tampa for Kansas City in week 4. So bouncing around, but yeah, it's a lot of fun.
All right. Hey, listen, David, I hope to see you back. We got another one of these Washington Commanders Eagles games later in the season. I hope that I have an opportunity to come and do this with you again.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and have a great night, man.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
All right. David Harrison joins me, and I want to thank him from the bottom of my heart coming in, taking some time. And there you have it. Very good stuff here. Pretty compelling about Carson Wentz and how he's been fitting in down there in Washington. And that's, I think, the biggest story that us here in Philadelphia are kind of taking away from everything. It's all going to be about Carson Wentz. Everything is going to be gravitated towards him, especially in the very early going, until he makes either the first big play or he gets his helmet racked a couple of times. So it's good to see, good to hear. And I want to thank David for coming on. So let's kind of transition now into what happened in week 2. Picks wise, folks, I got to do my picks. I got to tell you how I did this past week because you're going to be really proud of me. I really came back from nowhere. Remember, I was 5-11 last week. I needed a bounce back week. I got that bounce back week. 9-6, guys. That's right, 9-6. I have now moved my record to a healthy 14-17 for the season. I got kind of sidetracked or got kind of 8-balled by the friggin' Dolphins in the Raven game. Dolphins coming back from that halftime deficit, so that hurt a little bit. But overall, I did really well. Was able to pull myself back from the abyss. Now I am 14-17 on the season. I can breathe a sigh of relief. And let's get into my week 3 picks. Why I have you here. Let me find them again. I had them out just a second ago. We're going to do week 3. And where are they? Gotta love live TV. All right, here we go. Got it. Week 3. You guys ready? You're hearing it first. I don't know if anybody's doing week 3 picks on the Tuesday night. That's the beautiful and the bad thing about doing a show early in the week is I get the opportunity to kind of first crack at it, but it could also come up the worst if I'm because there's a lot of unknowns about player availability at this point. But heading into week 3, the Steelers and the Browns will get us rocking on Thursday Night Football, a AFC North clash in Cleveland. You know what? Don't like Cleveland a bit. I don't care anything about Cleveland. I want to see him fail. Give me Pittsburgh. Not that I'm a Pittsburgh guy, and I don't think Pittsburgh's any good this year as well. But give me Pittsburgh in this game. Now on to Sunday, Houston and Chicago. I'm going to go with Houston again. Not a big Chicago Bear guy. Just don't think they got it right down there. I think Houston's a lot better than a lot of people are giving them credit for. Give me Houston. The Raiders at the Titans. The Titans desperately need a win here. This is a no-brainer. If you're a betting man, you better lay it all on Tennessee. They need a win, and they're going to do everything they can to get a win. They gotta get this thing right. Give me Tennessee. KC at Indianapolis. Is Frank Reich's chair feeling a bit warm these days? Boy, I think it is. And I think it gets warmer as we move through this season. KC in this game. Buffalo at Miami. This might be the game of the week, at least offensively. Two teams that can put points up and put them up in huge, abundant numbers. Mike Gesicki was my savior in fantasy football this week as I had to go put him in for George Kittle, and he gave me 12 points. Thank you, Mike. Go Penn State. We are Penn State. Rawr. I'm going to go ahead, though, with Buffalo in this game as I think they keep their high scoring rolling, but this game is going to go back and forth, folks. It's going to be a good one to watch, but I like Buffalo. Detroit at Minnesota. You know, Minnesota might be feeling a little pissed off. They got another NFC North divisional game to go into. Give me the Vikings to come back and bounce back. Baltimore at New England. Give me Baltimore. Cincinnati at the Jets. Come on. Give me Cincinnati. New Orleans at Carolina. Got to go Carolina. Want that top 5 draft pick, folks. Then you got Jacksonville at the Chargers. Dougie P. It's not going to be easy for Doug P this year, but I'm telling you, he's going to get that team in the right direction. But I don't think it happens this year. Give me the Chargers. The Rams at Arizona, a battle in the desert. Give me the Rams. Atlanta at Seattle. Geno Smith. Could I say any more? Give me Atlanta. I know it's Marcus Mariota. God, it's the battle of the forgotten quarterbacks. Marcus Mariota and Geno Smith. Green Bay at Tampa. Big game. Give me Green Bay. San Francisco at Denver. It is the Sunday night game. Give me San Francisco. And then Monday Night Football, Dallas at the Giants. I'm going with the Giants to start the season at 3-0. Why? Because I hate the Cowboys. Give me the Giants 3-0 to start the season. And that leads me to the Washington-Philadelphia game. You heard David Harrison's pick. He likes the Eagles in this game. I also am not going to tell you. Yeah, should I tell you? Folks, I also like the Eagles in this game. I think the Eagles win. I saw this. I think it's been a win since the season came out. I'm riding off of the vibe and the high from last night as well. But I like the Eagles in this game. I think they're a better team. I think it's going to be an emotional game for a lot of people, even though there's not too many players left on that team. That new Carson Wentz here, I think it's going to be more of an emotional game in Philly when Carson comes here. I still like this. I think the Eagles ride the wave, get things on the W side in the division early on. I like the Eagles in this game as well. So there you have my week 3 picks. And folks, I was going to spend a little time talking about the Philadelphia Phillies, but I am way over my time on this, and I will be coming back at you at about 45 minutes anyway with the Vikings final. So let's go ahead and pay some bills, shall we? This is our schedule this week on EOP. You're watching. It's Tuesday, so you would have seen Kelly Green Hour, Birds of the Round Table, me. Chalk Talk is happening here in about 4 minutes, and then later on tonight, the Vikings final. We're going to do some Blue Jay action. And then on Wednesday, you got the Philly Press Box Radio, EOP Live, and of course, the Vikings final. Don't forget, this weekend, our pre-half and post-game coverage of the Eagle Commander game. And this is also the Philly Sports Strip game where we're going to invade FedEx Field. So keeping an eye out for all the stuff that we're going to be showing to you over the weekend for this game. And don't forget Dolan's Bar in Ridley Park, Delco's only bar. And Philly Sports Trips, what can I say? They're going to be descending upon FedEx Field 1,000 strong. Was it 8 buses or something like that? We're going to be going down the FedEx Field this weekend. Big Al and the rest of the guys are going to be there bringing it to you. I was actually going, but then I had to bail out at the last minute due to a family issue. So I'm really bummed about that, but I know they're going to have a great time. But don't forget all the other stuff Philly Sports Trips has to offer. Head over to their website and check it out. And of course, there was their tailgate. Don't pay attention. That was last night. I hope you guys had fun who went to that. We are going to be live in location doing our pre, half, and post game shows on October 2nd at the South House in South Philadelphia for the Eagle Jacksonville Jaguar game. So make sure you come out and check that out. And don't forget, if things are going great in life and some all of a sudden they are not, and you need help with workman's comp, motor vehicle accidents, personal injury, or criminal law, Dave Cherry is the guy to call, 610-565-0300. Tell him the boys at AOP and Matty B sent you. And don't forget the original Talking Philly Sports with Matty B, the podcast, available anywhere you can find your podcast, dropping about 3 episodes weekly as we navigate through the NFL season and beyond this year. And folks, I want to thank one more time David Harrison from the Locked On Commanders podcast and from Sports Illustrated Nation, for coming on and giving some time with me. It's much appreciated. Hopefully to bring people on every week. I got some people lined up, so we're making that happen as we continue to move through this season. And until we talk again later, folks, what do they say? That is the news, and I am out of here.